Hello everyone, travel with me from Shanghai to Wenzhou. This is a winter program that is hosted by our school every single year, where there are basically 5 to 6 routes traveling to all over China in different cities that focus on different areas and subjects. So in our case, going to Wenzhou meant the mathematics route. We had 5 days of travel from January 1st to January 15th, and the first day that we arrived, we went to this person called Jiang Lifu, who lived in the 1900s. And is sort of considered the master of geometry in China. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of California and a master's degree from Harvard. And we basically visited his residence, which has been renovated from previously. Then we went to our stay of residence that night, and this was sort of like a guest house where basically the rooms were built to a much more folklore style than if we were to stay at a hotel. The view was honestly so nice, one of the nicest views I've ever had. And then we went to have dinner. Because we were in a small village near Wenzhou, the food was sort of traditional, and so a lot of people were not really used to what we were eating, and they actually bought ramen packets on the way back. The last part of our trip for today was the Red Village. The main activity was to learn how to make a shoe out of grass and hay, and it's used as a tourism site for teachings of the Chinese Revolution. The next thing we went to see the home of Su Buqing, who is another Chinese mathematician. He is considered the king of mathematics, or the brilliant mathematical star in the eastern country. He founded the School of Maths in Zhejiang University, and his former place of residence has been transformed into a red site, which means the Chinese government promotes it for academic research. They also built a museum for him which focuses on three-dimensional shapes and space conjugate theory, and also geometric shape design and computers. And a lot of this has to do with dimensions because he was really well known in the field of geometry. Some of the other students who were not in the same field as they went on to routes which explored areas of sciences, Chinese history, and the Chinese culture. But our particular route mostly all had these mathematicians who were really interested in this particular area. Some of the students who went on this were also part of the planning group, which meant that they were the ones creating the route and planning like the destinations and the itinerary of where we had to go every single day. So they actually picked this out, and they thought that these were some of the historical sites that were really famous and were really well worth visiting. We had 4 teachers who came with us, and these were like the teachers who planned this route along with the other students. And quite obviously, they were all math teachers, and so they were really knowledgeable in this area. Then we grabbed lunch and we headed to the Maths Marvel Museum. This museum is sort of the reason why a lot of people come to this place. It's really cool. It is located in Pingyang, which is sort of like a village that is near Wenzhou, and it's huge. It's also super kid-friendly, so a lot of younger students like to come here as there are many activities. The first activity that we went to was this escape room. So this was sort of based on logic, and you basically had to find your way into the next room. But I would say that it's not really the best designed escape room because there were a lot of really simple games, and you could honestly just go to the next room by pushing the door open for some of them. But for some of them, you actually had to use like each other's knowledge in order to get to the next one. For example, we had to go into this one where there were lasers, and you had to just make sure to pass through the lasers without it like turning on. But then there were some really simple ones where you just had to press onto the door for 15 seconds in order for the door to open, and this was really simple. But as a whole, there were 30 or so different games in here, and a lot of them required logic as well as mathematical applications. And we had this older student, which in Chinese we call 学长, which is basically a respectful way to call someone who is older than you by like a grade or 2. And this particular person was really good at maths, and so he was head of like the maths club, the maths activities outside of school, and he was also one of the main planners for this route, and he led us through all of these games because he already played them before when he visited this place back in August last year. This museum was more suited for younger kids who should be probably in the age of early kindergarten or early junior school, so it was a bit young for us because some of the activities were really young, like sliding down the slide and finding out how to like open doors. But it was for the point of getting us interested in maths, and I think this was like a really good activity for that. After this, we traveled to another part of the museum where there were VR carts where we were able to play games. I'm not, to be honest, too sure how this is related to maths, but I think it had something to do with logic, and basically there were a lot of games that we just had to win through this, but the games were so simple that you would win no matter what. This winter program was scheduled right after our end terms at our school, and so this was really important for our transcripts. And so during this time, a lot of teachers were still marking the papers, or they have already finished but they haven't uploaded the grades yet. And so we were actually honestly super scared because we were so afraid of the grade that we would get. And I had actually initially chosen a program that was going to the sciences because I was more interested in that, but I ended up having to choose Wenzhou because that particular place, like the seats were all filled up because there were a lot of people that were interested in it. This was one of the optical illusions that we saw at the museum. I think this was so cool. Try to find like what is different about each picture. I would say a huge difference between this international school and some of the international schools abroad is that it's a lot more rigorous academically, and so these programs are like sort of like a blessing in disguise because you are nervous at the same time. Lastly, we came across some of these mathematical theories which I never heard about. These were conjectures that people have made up, and then we explored in the town that was around this museum. So the reason why we even went exploring in the first place was very interesting because one of the grade 11s who is involved in this program, they came here before and they had a really good idea of like some of the other villages and shops that were around, and the reason why we went exploring with them was because it was just such a unique experience because we were seeing like a side of the village that was not part of the initial program. The Chinese New Year was coming up, so a lot of the decorations and setup was built up for the Chinese New Year celebration, and so it was really festive and the entire thing just really felt really homey. It felt like we were having lunch, or we could say an afternoon snack, at like our local grandmother's house. After about an hour, we got on the bus and we went to the local, what we could call the city center in Pingyang district, and we got ice cream and bubble tea. We headed back to our guest house. We stopped on our way at a store where we stopped again for some snacks, and then after we headed back, it was celebrations for the Chinese New Year, and because it was something that was coming up, we had a lot of cakes and food and also fireworks that was in preparation for that. Someone's birthday, and so that was what the cake was for. After breakfast the next day, we traveled to Wenzhou Keen University. So this was sort of like a collaboration university similar to our international school, where basically there's Wenzhou University in collaboration with Kew University from the US. So at the end of graduation, they will receive 2 degrees, one from Wenzhou University and one from Kew University, which means they will get a dual diploma, which then means that they can go on to study at any university after that with both diplomas, whether it's in China or in the US. If you were to study at Wenzhou Keen University in Wenzhou, it would cost you around 70,000 RMB. However, if you were to study as like an exchange student in the US, it would cost you $6,000 per semester. Keene University is located in New Jersey, but to be honest, I felt like Wenzhou Keene University was like a mini Hollywood in Wenzhou. Honestly, in order to get to this school, it was quite easy because the scores were quite low. Then we grabbed lunch and we headed to Wenzhou University. So Wenzhou University is probably the best university in Wenzhou, and for the most part, we just visited some of the founders and what created this university. So a lot of us were quite bored during this time, and we had discussions with each other about what we were planning for this winter holiday. So for the most part, most students during this holiday would have to review and also preview some of the content that is upcoming in the upcoming semester, or some people would do winter programs, whether that's abroad or within China with other universities or other high schools. Our upcoming winter holiday is 5 weeks long, so it's almost half a summer break. During this period of time, our bio and chemistry grades for the end term also came out, and so a lot of people were freaking out about that. So then we moved on to the hotel where we checked in and then we settled into our room. My dorm mate was already sick, so she was at the hotel the entire day, so I didn't really need to check in. And after that, we went out again to grab dinner. This time the restaurant was fantastic. The food was really amazing and the seating was also really cool. They were playing musical chairs outside and the whole atmosphere was just very festive. And then we went back and I played cards with the other girls. The next day after breakfast, we went out to see Wenzhou High School. So Wenzhou High School is the longest and standing high school in Zhejiang province. So it was built in 1902, and so the high school is huge and it mainly focuses on STEM areas and mathematics. It excels in mathematics because some of the founders were mathematicians in China. There's a museum in the school which we had visited, and we saw some of the students who are still in class. So these students are currently in their finals. They are a week later than us, and then we went out onto their field. So this reminds me of some of my childhood, because when I was younger, I was in a Chinese public school, and this was a public school experience that I had experienced. And we played frisbee with them, and then we left to go to the next site. Because our visit had ended a little bit early, we went to a wetland that was nearby, and we just looked around, and some of the students were talking about poems, which I didn't really understand, but they were trying to find poems that suited the particular scenery we were looking at, and then we had lunch. In the afternoon, we visited this place called Guan, which is where basically there were a lot of famous people or mathematicians that were really well known in the area, and they were displayed in this museum. And after that, we went to this place called Jie, which is basically like a night street where you can buy anything you want that's related to like goods or pets or food, a lot of those things. Our dinner was fantastic that night. There was steak on the table, and then we went back to our hotel, and this was our last night, so we had to pack up before we left. This was our final day in Wenzhou, and this was the day that we went hiking. So the place that we went hiking at was this mountain called Yidangshan, which is Yidang Mountain, and this was very famous in the Zhejiang province because it had a lot of really well-known statues and also mountain shapes. So a lot of the shapes that we saw of the mountains, they were symbols of different animals, and that's what they were named after. We just had to first scan our faces in order to register ourselves to go in because we came as like a big group, so we didn't have to pay anything for that. And the places that we visited was really beautiful. There was one show that we had to watch. It started at 11:30 exactly, and it was of this person who was hanging in the air and going across a zip line and performing this like really cool circus trick. I thought it was really dangerous. Then we went further up into like the depth of the mountain where there was this really amazing fountain, and it was basically the start of a waterfall going down, but because during the season it was really cold, there was not actually water that was flowing down, but we could see the little pond that was still there. After we grabbed lunch, we went to another wetland, and I think everyone agreed that this was probably one of the most beautiful wetlands / mountains we've ever been to because of this magnificent waterfall. This waterfall is very unique. It would be waterfall from the top, but then once it reached a point, it would be rain all the way at the bottom. And so we created this really nice view of the entire scenery, and everyone went into the waterfall, and then we just took a picture, and that was probably the most scenic and beautiful images that we've ever taken. And then we got on the subway to go home.